Welcome to Hort Culture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hey friends, how's everybody doing today?
Good.
Doing all right.
Good. How are you?
Good, because I'm looking at my inappropriate plant mug right now.
Ooh.
So
Is it like
full of, so it has plant drawings all over it, as you know I would have, but they all have very inappropriate names.
But they're also their real names, right?
They are real. Like if you look up this name, so as an example, the one in the bottom of the mug is Family Jewels milkweed. So,
yeah.
Also known as Harry Ball's milkweed. It is a real thing.
Okay.
Also shagbark hickory, nipplewort,
Nice.
knobweed, sicky willy. These are all legitimate
Provocative
plant names.
That sounds like an episode. Somebody put that in the notes.
They also sell provocative bird mugs. So if you're looking, if you're already planning for Christmas and you have a birder in your life, they sell
who
those
has a
and they
sense
say,
of humor,
yeah,
or maybe not.
Blue-footed boobies, and that's
I have seen the
like
shirt with all the bird names on it. I've seen that shirt and it's pretty cool. And then it features
birds.
It's
Just don't without consent. Don't send stamen pics.
Yes, or pistol for that matter.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like that should be like the Horticulture Club's next shirt. Should be that. Don't
It's
like a big Asiatic lily.
Consent is a good message, no matter what.
Yeah, always, absolutely.
Provocative
Although that's
plant
going to
names.
change a lot for when you have to send those types of things because you have a botany class. So
That's true.
Once the keyword filter at the university kicks out some of these names because it's like you're sending inappropriate material, and we're like, no, we're not. It's a plant name.
It's literally a plant name.
What?
Here's the Latin.
Or we're talking about birding or whatever, Jessica. Yes.
Whatever we're talking about.
Yes, whatever we talk about from time to time. Which
we
this
are talking
this
about.
level of stir crazy thought and whatever else reminds me of the way that I get in the middle of winter time. Alexis,
Yeah.
How about you?
Softball.
Yeah, it reminds me of all the beautiful plants we can have in the wintertime, actually.
Yes.
You mean plants on the outside in the wintertime that are beautiful still?
Yeah.
That can provide some interest.
We think of them as beautiful inside and out, Ray, but
okay.
I guess if you're
you can talk meristems if you want to. Whatever.
Yeah, we like to have for another houseplant episode. Maybe maybe we'll do one of those. Bring on somebody who's good at that, other than Jessica and I. So although there's not very many of them because we're pretty great. But yeah, so winter interest plants. I love talking about these because it's sort of part of that 4-season landscaping, and or if you're a commercial producer, you also could call yourself a stick farmer in some of these cases, which people legitimately do call themselves stick farmers. But whether you're landscaping or maybe you're doing some commercial horticulture, floriculture production, this is a good episode to maybe check out if you're kind of wanting to expand your season and or expand your visual impacts outside. So does anybody have any favorites that they like?
Well, before I don't mean to offend, but stick farmer, that sounds Australian to me. Like an Australian person would come up with that or say that.
They might have. I don't know. That's just what goes around on the interwebs. People will say
they say a lot of cool stuff. So
let's call it structural farming, maybe. Yeah, for winter interest, all the plant needs. Now, I am serious. You say, well, what's some of your favorite plants? When I was working in the landscape industry, I had one of the older architects there. I'm not a landscape architect, but he would help me out. And it was actually an architect that loved plants, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But he said, sometimes all it takes in the landscape is not cutting down something like an ornamental grass. That is not invasive. I'll qualify that. Something like one of the sages or whatever. But he said, sometimes all it takes for winter interest is structure.
Mm-hmm.
Something that'll capture leaves or snow or have some kind of presence in there. And that it may not even be color, but just something.
Mm-hmm.
But now commercially, when I started out, I was in commercial landscaping before I came to extension for a time. And, I was one of those that was guilty of, we started out with a base planting of things like holly and taxus and junipers. You had to have evergreens ever so, when you're working with commercial landscapes or bigger home landscapes, you would lay out your base plants first, meaning typically evergreens that would have a presence in the wintertime. We started with that. And I was guilty of just focusing too much on evergreens, but there's, I guess, guys, there's like so many more plants there was then, and there's even more now with cultivars and interesting things along those lines. There's a lot more plants other than just evergreens that provide winter interest now, I guess. We were just talking about that before the show got started, and there's a bunch. There's a bunch.
Well, I got a non-evergreen that I like.
Fire away, man. I want to hear about it.
I like, we have a couple of witch hazels.
Yes, there are some of my absolute favorite, and there's just not like there's a lot of different kinds, isn't there? The cultivars of the witch hazels. They're so fascinating.
Cultivars as well as a couple of different, like even different species. So there's
fall and spring or late winter and fall blooming.
Yeah,
there's a Hemamelis virginiana. And then the other one is the Ozark. I can't remember the species, but the traditional one that we think of as witch hazel is the Virginiana, I believe. And so, they flower at different times. But the thing that's cool about the traditional witch hazel is that it flowers in the wintertime, late, I guess, early spring, late winter. And it has these little curly kind of yellow flowers on it. I found some katydid.
They're like neon. They're so cool. They're so bright. They're just... Calling them yellow seems like a understatement.
But there's all the cool ones that have the red at the base that are actually a lot more showy. And I forget, that's not Arnold's Promise. That's one of the other witch hazels that are really cool, but they have a lot more red at the base so that you can actually, they have more of a presence. I mean, in addition to that really, really nice yellow color.
Yeah. Speaking of like red and yellow, like the red twig dogwoods or the yellow twig ones, there's like... if you're listening kind of locally in Danville, I know when I drive through Danville, there's somebody who has them like as a hedge of yellow twig dogwoods that really like pop out in the winter. I myself have planted the red ones before, and if they are happy, they will explode, which was fine because I planted them to cover my ugly shed where I used to live at. But they give you that nice pop of color in the winter.
Those are your stick farmers. For those of you,
right?
You can.
So that's like it's like it loses all its leaves, but you're saying like the bark and
right.
So twigging and stuff has like
a lot of people have seen them because they're used a lot in Christmas decorations or holiday decorations, and so you'll see them with the evergreens. If you've ever seen these like sticks that almost look like they've been painted red or kind of like a bright yellow color, that is something natural, and it's all winter. They have it all season, but the leaves covered up for the most part, and it does bloom. Like when people think about dogwoods, they think about trees and blooms, but it's
much smaller flower.
And it's a shrub, so you can plant it. There's a little bit of flexibility there where you plant it, but
so part of what I'm hearing here is that we maybe reframe some of our thoughts about beauty and things that we notice to include the structure of deciduous trees once they've lost their leaves. And I'll say, I know we're always all thinking about bonsai, pretty much all the time,
all the time,
but in Japan, and I mean United States too, it's actually traditional that a lot of times the deciduous trees, so the trees that lose their leaves, things like the maples and hornbeams and others, are actually exhibited like in competition in the winter when they don't have leaves, so that you can observe, because the really beautiful part of it is the twigging and the part
that makes sense.
I think of like all the contorted plants. Is that kind of like the unique structure? But
like also
that,
like, so without going too far down this rabbit hole, the part of the magic of making a miniature tree look like a small version of a giant tree is to have the internode length, the space between one set of leaves and the next, to be really, really short. And that's this whole practice and yada, yada, yada. You can't see that when it's covered in leaves, but you can see it. You can see that structure. If you see a really highly ramified plant without leaf, it's a really powerful, beautiful thing. And I find myself looking at regular trees, like when they're out of leaf, in dormancy, like against a blue winter sky, to be this really beautiful. It almost has like a veins of the body, like arteries and or roots or fractals or some sort of, I don't know, sacred geometry or something.
Yeah, I think, and there's trees that you think of like something like the river birch that we're all pretty familiar with, and a lot of what's beautiful about it is really the bark. And so just kind of thinking of plants from more of a perspective of it doesn't necessarily have to be green all the time. That is kind of nice, and we can talk about some of those as well. Some different options, but I think there's a lot of magic to winter, especially like if you're lucky enough to get some snow. I mean, a red twig dogwood popping against snow is just
so pretty.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Or just if you're lucky to get snow at all, just how the snow blows up against the trees, right, and lands on them,
branches.
Yeah,
so that is pretty.
I remember the walking through the arboretum, and this isn't always awesome. Sometimes trees lose limbs as a result, but they had a big ice storm. Had several ice storms across time, and walking through the arboretum here on campus and seeing all those trees with this like magical, like glass covering looking thing, and yeah, I love.
As long as it's light, we don't want anything too heavy. We don't want breaking trees, but there is like that little sheen, and it's just like really sparkly, and can make those really cold days a little bit better when you're like, I just need it to end. Especially in February when you're like, when is it over?
Yeah.
To be clear, I didn't cause the ice storm. I just wanted to put that out there.
We all thought you were powerful enough for that.
Yeah, so. Well, not yet.
Father Winter.
Not yet.
Alexis, have you shared a winter interest plant?
No, I think one that I have so many that I love and have planted a bunch of them at my house for both commercial and just landscape reasons. But one that I think a lot of people don't know about is beautyberry, and we have a native beautyberry to Kentucky and different areas in the United States. We also have an Oriental one. Both are fine. I know a lot of times when we talk about plants that have come over from Asia, usually they can be very invasive. This one is not the case. It's a little bit more showy, but we do have a native one for those of you who just are really into that. And it is purple, which I feel like, and it's like a bright pink purple.
Very bright.
Yeah, it's and the Oriental, I think, is in my experience a little bit more pinky versus the it's like a red purple versus the American, and it could be just my soil, but it tends to be a little bit more blue purple. But I feel like that's not a color we see that time of year. And man, so the plant will lose all of its leaves. It's just kind of a pretty simple plant. It would be great as like a backdrop to something else because it's just green. It's overall really healthy, really hardy. And so it's just something simple you don't pay a ton of attention to until it starts to get berries on it in the fall. And those berries will hang on in these really big clusters for a
placement's kind of unique, right?
Yeah,
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's like all down the branch, and there's these big clusters that kind of encircle the branch with these little baby berries. And man, when you've got ice hanging off of those or snow or something, that purple just really pops against kind of a blank landscape. It's pretty spectacular. So that's a fun one. It's great, pollinators, all that good stuff. Yeah.
When you say it, like when you describe it as having some beauty, like the berry.
Beauty. Berry. It's a calicarpa, by the way. I feel like where possible, we'll throw some Latin at you, but a lot of these names can get are very similar, intertwined, things like that. So beautyberry I'm talking about is calicarpa is the genus there. And like I said, there's an Americana and then there's an Oriental version as well. And it comes in, it's a lot harder to find, but it does also have a white berry version and a peachy orange berry version. So I think the peachy orange is one of the more difficult ones to find. It is a native and is not propagated very often. And then the white one is also something really cool when it gets berries on it in the fall. So just fun fact.
You know what they say, calicarpa diem.
Seize the plants.
Seize the beauty.
So
berries.
Also,
by the berries.
Talking about a plant with berries, a lot of people think winter interest, they think like evergreen, right? And so far we haven't talked really anything about evergreen, but one you may think is an evergreen, but it's not, is winterberry holly, right? That's the correct name for that one. It's a holly, but it is deciduous, and it has a variety of different, well, I guess maybe just 2 colors of berries, right? The red.
Yeah, there's like different shades within red and different shades in the gold, but yeah, there's 2 versions of
it has nice fall color as well, right? Am I making that up? And loses those leaves and then will retain those berries. And a good one for, just that winter color. And then a lot of like birds, I believe, feed on it as well.
I like the plants that have the wildlife aspect too. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a native as well. It's Ilex verticillata. Actually, mine we're recording this in September, and I noticed late August. So I don't know if it has to do with the drought or what, but mine all have like fully colored up berries already, and like still have plenty of leaves. So it is pretty early, usually mid-September to late September. And then they keep those berries and they eventually lose their leaves. And then you kind of have this just bush that's very bright. And the gold and the red are both pretty. The one thing to mention, and sorry, Jessica, you were probably going to mention this, but if you're going to get one of these winterberry hollies, you have to have 2. And so you have to have a male and a female. And the male will just be a green plant that has some nice fall color, but it's nothing really spectacular. The female is, of course, the one that has berries, and you need them to pollinate. And just like something like apples or pawpaws, not every winterberry pollinates every cultivar. So make sure you're if you're going to go get one, you're getting ones that can pollinate each other. So there's, for example, and they have named them something pretty similar. So for example, there's one called like Mrs. Poppins, and then there's a Mr. Poppins, which will flower at the same time. And so you get that cross-pollination happening because they don't always flower, but you only need like one male that you can, and to several females. And it really just needs to be within like 25 feet. So you can kind of just like tuck it in wherever, but just kind of like a little tidbit there for you. If you're not getting any berries,
that might be the reason why.
You might need a pollinator. So
classic when Barry met Holly story.
He's on one today, guys.
He
is.
Yeah,
this weather has got him feeling it today.
Are we still? That was all about winterberry, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I really like that too. I didn't know that about the 2 plant thing.
Yeah, Mrs. And there's like, they'll have like Gold Bell, and like they usually have like a Mr. Gold Bell or something like that.
So this sounds like a setup for a joke, and it's actually not.
It does sound like a joke, but it's not. This is real life.
How do they tell the difference between the male and the female? Like, you have to let it grow for a little bit before you know?
I think a lot of these are propagated from cuttings. So if you're taking a cutting from a male, but yeah, like if you're experimenting with color, and the people who are breeding these plants, yes, they'll wait for it to flower, get old enough to flower, and that's how they can tell the difference. So
I gotcha.
That's why a lot of woody plants are so expensive, because it takes so many years to get these cultivars to even a point where you're like, is this something? It's like 5 years down the road, and you have no idea if it's worth your time yet. So.
Yeah, it's kind of wild though. The trees that you see, small trees and stuff you see in the garden center sometimes, and these things are like, some of them are like 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the dwarf stock stuff, or like this smaller stuff. And they're selling it, you think, oh man, that's really expensive. It's like $200 or something. But then you're like, this was started in 2004.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And you're only selling it for $200 or something, whatever, $300. It's just a wild value proposition thought. This is a side note from, yeah.
He's getting in the weeds, folks, but we like
weeds
here at Hort Culture.
I've developed more of an appreciation for junipers over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
that's a huge group of plants. Yeah, I mean they cover a lot of ground. Junipers do, no pun intended,
but also pun intended.
Yeah, very much punny. Yeah,
which junipers are you big fans of?
Pun intentional.
Right.
What's that?
What junipers are you a big fan of? Like anyone in particular?
Oh,
what gal strikes your fancy?
I like the procumbens junipers with like kind of more of a growing along the ground habit, kind of deal. I like these several different varietals of Juniperus chinensis, with these different types of foliage. That is big in bonsai and like Japanese gardens and stuff. Junipers are an important part of that. I mean, I actually kind of like Eastern red cedar.
I love Eastern red cedar. I think it's lovely.
Just like when you can find like a really large tree, and sometimes it makes me like second guess and like, is that an Eastern red cedar? Because we're so used to seeing them like small and shrubby,
huge,
or in fence lines. And so when you see like an actually like huge one, they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so for those following along at home, the Eastern red cedar is actually not a cedar but a juniper.
Juniperus, not cedrus.
Yeah.
It's one of the few evergreeny type things that do well in our state, zone 6 and 7, our transitional zones, because in Kentucky, we are a tough state for evergreens. I mean, we have a few more options when it comes to the smaller plant materials, but as far as trees go, we're a tough state for evergreen trees here in Kentucky.
I had one of our tree specialists, extension specialist, Dr. Fountain, one time was giving a talk, and he was talking about Colorado blue spruce, and everybody loves them, right? In Kentucky, everybody wants a Colorado blue spruce, and they're very beautiful plants. But he said, so why do we think Colorado blue spruce doesn't do well? And everybody's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, it's disease, it's blah, blah. And he goes, well, they're from Colorado, and that's a very big difference between Colorado and Kentucky. And so like, we say this every time we talk about plants. It's like, go back to where that plant is, native to, and where you're growing it. Is that going to be similar enough?
Right. Hold on. Not. Colorado potato beetles seem to get along just fine here.
Yeah, but are they actually from Colorado?
Are they? I'm not sure.
We don't have a passport system in the United States, Alexis. It's free travel here. Okay?
Free roam. Free roam.
Well, you talking about junipers reminds me, I have a love-hate relationship with evergreens for some reason. And I feel like sometimes it goes back to this thought process of I love when nature goes to sleep, and it's kind of this reminder for me to take a rest as well. And then I see this evergreen out here pulling double duty, and I'm like, what the hell, man? Go to bed.
But now never shutting down.
It's just a more subtle slumber.
It is. You're right.
Slowing down, not a stopping.
It's not as dramatic. Maybe I'm just
too dramatic.
It's a low drama. It's a chill situation.
Their philosophy is, I had a shirt one time that had a juniper. Believe it or not, it said, what was it? It was no, it was consistency over intensity. And I love that. I love it. It was some kind of evergreen on the back. I don't know. It was funny. It was an arboretum shirt.
I feel like that could be a personality test question or something like that. It's like, I
don't know that I'm either. I'm not real consistent. And most of the time I don't have a lot of intensity over the duration. So
yeah,
I think that is something though that I've noticed more. So since I got into doing the perennial stuff in the backyard and doing the bonsai and stuff like that, I've had an increased appreciation for, conifers and stuff like that.
Yeah. I love them.
They're a huge part of that practice, but something that's really interesting to pay attention to. I think it's a good thing you pointed it out, and I was obviously just teasing. But the evergreens, they do have a winter phase, and if you pay attention, they have a different color. They'll change from that kind of like, depending on the species, that vibrant kind of bright green or dark color. Green that like I am photosynthesizing at max right now, to this either like more of a dark faded kind of color, almost a purplish in some cases, and there are some cultivars specifically for winter interest, and this is more in the landscape, where they'll take on this crazy yellow in the winter. There's a Hinoki cypress that's like a bright yellow.
That's exactly what I was going to talk about. Camas cypress, but also you beautiful lead in there. So yeah, the Hinoki.
Sorry, go for it.
No. I don't want to stop you. The Hinoki is fascinating to me. Like the big, and if you're like, what are you talking about? One of them is like the big golden mop. A lot of people are familiar with, which can be really cool. But it comes in like lots of cool shapes and colorings. And you're right, like they are beautiful. Those are the only evergreens I have at my house, are like the ones
classic
with the
gold mops. Those have been like
I like the
top 10
wavy
like
ones.
landscape. Oh yeah, those are cool. There's a lot of variations among those, but gold mops are one of those that just is used in almost in a formula in landscapes and
Jessica,
foundation
remind
plantings.
me the reason some of those evergreens get sort of that almost more matted, and maybe they change a little bit of a coloring, but specifically talking about kind of that matte color, they lay down like more of like a waxy layer, right? Like as the seasons change, is that for a lot of
I think
plants?
like they're trying to prevent like water loss,
Drying,
right?
Desiccation,
the
yeah,
drying.
it is.
Because even though they're still like, most people are shocked to know like, oh, it's green, so it's actively growing, but it's really not, like you said, it's like kind of in its resting state. And plants can dry out real quickly in the winter. Like we don't think about
Evergreen
that.
struggle.
So
we saw so many die, like 2 years ago?
yes,
We had no snow cover and just the horrible winds and really cold temps, and they just sucked
everybody's boxwoods
life out of everybody's boxwoods, and even some of our really hardy cedars and stuff like that. It's pretty wild.
Everybody wanted to replace their boxwoods that year.
Yeah.
Yeah, your broadleaves are the worst.
I'm trying to think, what have we not covered, Alexis?
Well, I was going to say
lots. I mean, we've not. There's so many plants.
Go ahead,
I was
Jessica.
gonna say like flowers wise, right? Like other like something that pops in my mind that always brings me joy in like January, sometimes, or February, are little crocuses popping up out
through the snow.
through the snow, or when you see them in mass plantings or just a few scattered here and there. It's always really cute and really a sign of spring, even when they pop up through the snow.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, harbingers.
Something that I also thought about that I will let Alexis deep dive on is hellebores.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's so many, and if you are like me and you have like a little bit of a gothic emo soul, there is a black hellebore, and it's probably one of the most black, like kind of true, when you think of the coloring, black flowers I have ever seen. I mean, there are others out there, but like it is going to be the blackest of black, which is super cool. And they are, evergreen. So you do have like these green plants, and they're not particularly showy, but they do have some, kind of rough and tough foliage. But then in January or February, and there's different cultivars that bloom at different times, but you can get some really early ones that are like late January, early February, at least for our area of this state, that'll pop up in these bright red or pink or like lime green colors, and they just kind of really pop that time of year because you're not used to seeing it. And you'll look out like your window and you're like, oh, and suddenly there's just something really bright in the landscape after doom and gloom of winter. And they're pretty spectacular, and they're predominantly shade. They like to be partially shaded. And they're just really hardy plants. And there's tons out there. There's doubles. There's ones that are really upward facing versus some of them kind of nod their heads, and they're just like cute little bells that hang over. But there's some spectacular breeding that has happened in the hellebore world, and just some really fun colors. And yeah, talk about like hope that brings you, like just like the crocus. There's just something really special when the first hellebores bloom, and you're like, okay, it's just like the little pit stop in winter that you're like, I'm gonna get through this. It's gonna be all right. We're gonna get there.
The end is nigh in a good way.
The seasonal depression will fade.
Yeah.
So.
Days are getting longer.
Yeah.
I like along those same lines you said, rough and tumble, like foliage. I'm thinking, like, I know it's an unsung hero for me, but I grew up kind of in the hills. But Christmas ferns, I love the theme of like, all the ferns that pop through. I mean, they don't hold up under a lot of snow, but like there's nothing that I love more than a grouping of those in a light snow, and you see all that green foliage just kind of on the ground. I mean, yeah, we know more. It seems like I hear a lot more demand for like things like coral bells, things like that. But I love Christmas ferns. I love the caryxes, all of the sedges. I'm a big fan of those. And I've landscaped some with, just to give structure, horizontal structure, is like even our natives, like big and little blue stem and even switchgrass. I use all of those as an alternative to some of the more invasive grasses, and I've used clumps of those, but I love all of those, and I don't hear as much about those. And they're not super showy. They just have a little bit of presence. And in some cases, there's just the structure, like in the native grasses. But I don't know why I love the Christmas ferns. Not Christmas cactus, but Christmas ferns. I really like those, and I just don't hear those mentioned a whole lot for winter interest. But they're a good one. They're a really good one.
And this is not the plants themselves, but it's just a comment that there is something kind of cool for us. So we have a mix of some woody perennials, but a lot of like herbaceous perennials that die all the way back to the ground every year. And there is something really crazy about the negative space that is left. And we do like a lot of hardscaping in and around those things. So rocks and maybe like different concrete figures or beds, just different kind of paths or stuff like that. And the inversion, like if you take a picture of it from like July when everything's at peak and then take a look at it in winter, there's something really beautiful about that inversion and the idea that like all this stuff sprung up from from just all below ground mass to all this vegetation and then goes back to it. It's this like waxing and waning waves kind of thing.
I do love the hardscaping
really cool.
in that aspect, Brett. I'm a fan of that too, and I love like little things that are revealed when things go away, like a big bed of like big blue hostas or something, and then that goes away, and you show these super cool river rocks or small statuary or something like that. Yeah, I've always liked that, and if it's intentional, you can have like curvilinear design around edging or something that you can just reveal some really cool features and just be beautiful. And kind of understated. Yeah. So I get it. I do like that.
It's also kind of an expression of our own house mix of aesthetics within our household with regard to plants. Cause Annie's sort of like maximalist, like biomass. It's just like this jungle that's like creeping closer and going to like swallow you up. And mine's a little bit more of a angular, architectural minimalism.
Celebrating the rest period.
Yeah, exactly. So
I like it.
So I'm only allowed out there in the winter is what I'm trying to say. I can go out there and sit out there as much as I want.
It's your winter period. Go outside and sit among the rocks, Brett.
It's looking great out there. It's February. It's looking pretty good. Just
the bald boy likes minimalism.
Ray mentioned earlier about wildlife, right? So like leaving winter interest for wildlife. So there's that great debate, right? With like, so I say I have some purple coneflower, some echinacea, right, out of my flower bed.
Winter,
I leave those up for the birds to come to eat, or do I want to cut them down, and clean out my garden at the end of the year, right? Do they have disease? Do I need to remove those out, right? Or do you want to leave them up? But I think there's like quite a few different things you can just like leave up from your perennials that wildlife enjoy, if that's your thing, all winter. Some of you may be wanting to deter wildlife from your yard and not bring them in.
Like, keep them away from my tulips.
Right.
Or, have that section a little further away and keep them focused in there and away from your tulips. So,
provide food and cover.
A little trap crop
away from the house. Yeah.
That's my excuse in the winter when I'm just like too tired to deal with anything anymore. I'm just like, I'm leaving it for the birds. Like I'm leaving it for the pollinators. Have you all seen that meme that's like, they talk about like, oh, I'm leaving these, these weeds or this milkweed for the pollinators.
Pollinator garden.
And then the person goes inside and like, all these dirty dishes are for the pollinators. Pile of laundry, pollinators.
I am such a great person right now. I'm doing such good work.
This is pollinators. Yeah, so it can be a good reason to like leave stuff up in your garden, but
we generally leave stuff in place for the most part over the winter, and at some point in like late winter, early spring. This is what we do at least. Annie will go out, in that stir crazy cabin fever of winter and just kind of stomp all the stalks down once there's the first couple of warm days and just kind of leave them in place as a mulch so we can see where other stuff's coming up. But is that what you all do? You all mostly leave stuff? We've also at some point we've cut them and bundled them and just like left them in the field in our yard as well. But the older we get, the less we do that.
There's a lot to be said about leaving them in place. I mean, like you said, it's definitely habitat and cover. for wildlife. So I know that's not always desirable if you're in a more formal setting, because those tend to be trap areas for like blowing leaves and things like that. But they also, on the flip side of that, when they trap leaves, they self mulch a lot better. When we have these really hard cold snaps, they provide additional insulation. So nature has a plan if you just let it work, folks.
Yeah, and there's some stems that stems and other plant material where like insects will lay eggs and overwinter
bumblebees
in
and things, or
little native bees will make little houses in there.
Totally. And that was the main reason we initially kept them out there, was just like, okay, we don't want to, we've left our babies inside this thing, and okay,
please leave our babies alone.
off to the yard waste thing.
Did we miss? Oh yeah, go ahead, Brad. Yeah.
No, that was all.
I was going to say, did we miss nine babies? The baby bees. We're not going to recover from baby bees, baby native bees. But nine bark, did we already talk about that? Did I miss that? Like all the nine barks? Didn't. That is one of mine that I mean, it's super popular. I mean, it's been around, but it's one of mine that I really enjoy in the wintertime is nine bark.
One of my favorites we haven't mentioned yet that for landscaping is Harry Lauder's walking stick. You know which one I'm talking about? The contorted corkscrew hazel, contorted filbert is also another name for it.
Yes.
Contorted filbert. I like that.
God, filbert. I mean, he's like so contorted.
Filbert, he's all
Filbert. I love that plant. Like I love the leaves on it. I mean, it's so like quirky. And then I love when the catkins, they're just kind of this mellow yellow color, and they like dangle off these really weird contorted sticks. If you're really into kind of like winter decorating, they're really great to like cut, and you can stick them in like a porch planter or in a wreath or something like that. But it's such a cool plant, and I almost bought one. I guess it was last year, and but it was sold already. There was like only one, and I was like, I don't even care how much this costs. It's coming home with me. It was so cute, and it was already sold, and I was like, no.
Alexis, have you seen the sumac that's sort of like that too? The tiger's eye or whatever.
Whoa,
it's a contorted version of sumac. Look that up.
What?
I don't know if I'm making that up, but it's the it's I can't remember the cultivar, but I think it's tiger eye. Look up tiger eye sumac.
Yeah. Tiger eye.
It's contorted.
It's not contorted, but it has an interesting branching. It's a more twisted than. It's not exactly
Rus
contorted.
hyphena is the Latin, and it like it gets.
I have Rus hyphena that I started.
Oh,
nice
from seed.
Yeah. Oh, fancy.
I was gonna maybe turn it into a bonsai, but I don't know if it's gonna comply. So if it doesn't, maybe we can plant it somewhere that has more space.
Oh, that's pretty. That's a pretty plant.
But it is, and it's one that I've kind of wanted, but I've only seen it a couple times in arboretums, and it was in more northern states, so would be adapted for Kentucky. But I've seen it in arboretums up north and really liked it. Really a cool plant. But
if you want it, Ray, I think I'm gonna bring it to you.
Oh man, that would be you've grown that from like baby, like seed you said, yeah, man. Those are cool plants, super cool. But in the wintertime, they really show off.
Speaking of things I found at a nursery, because sometimes you have a bad day and you go to a greenhouse or a nursery and you buy yourself a plant.
Doesn't everybody do that?
Like, everybody just have a better day from that point forward. Yeah,
that's how Jessica and I do our
That's how we cope.
When I come home, if I come home with a potted plant and I just like sit it in a windowsill, Tyler's like, my husband, he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "No, I bought myself a plant."
That's how I got another lemon tree, y'all.
But I found two of, they were on sale because they, are kind of starting to go dormant and nobody knows what they look like, is flowering quince. And man, again, another one that's like when you're in the depths of winter and you're, like, are we ever going to get through this? Flowering quince starts to bloom, and it is just really something special. And it spreads really nice. There's a bunch of different cultivars out there. There's some now that are like a really pretty peachy coral, but kind of traditionally, if you know about quince, you might be thinking of the kind of deep red, like ruby red color, and they're really lovely. But there's like some yellows. There's this new peachy version. That's the one I got two of. I got two, but and there's also white, and so there's just something, and they bloom all up and down that stem. So there's no leaves. It blooms all up and down the stem, and it's just like this huge patch and bloom in February, and they're pretty pretty spectacular. So if you're looking for more stuff to add winter interest in, you can go from berries to blooms to just like pretty sticks, and there's no kind of wrong way to do it. And I don't know, man, that just gets me through winter.
So, how this is a little bit of an aside. How would you rank the seasons according to how much you love them? Is winter your least favorite?
No, I think the dead of summer is like my worst, least favorite, but I'm learning to adapt.
Is that the case? Would that be the case even if you weren't growing stuff?
I don't know. I don't like being so hot. I'm also trapped inside. Like, to me, it's maybe if I lived around water or someplace like that where I could like cool off a little bit easier. But like, if I don't want to go outside in the dead of winter because it's too cold, and I don't want to go outside in the dead of summer because it's too hot, like those to me are very synonymous with each other. Like, I don't know. Ask me again in January how I feel. Right now we're coming off a heat wave, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. It's hard because each season has its own unique
They're all important,
things,
And
right? Yeah.
the older you get, I think the more you value each one of them. Like, as a kid, I think winter was fun because you were always like sled riding. And then in my like 20s and, late teens, it was like, I don't like the snow because I can't go do anything. And now I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, okay, it's time to rest. I can sit on my couch and like crochet my blanket, and there's nothing else I have to be doing. And that's
when you enjoy the rainy
time.
season. Yeah.
That's
you begin to enjoy that.
I don't know. Rain is like just reminds me of mud.
Yeah, on the
Although
farm.
right now I would kill for some mud.
Just reminds me of it. But I'm coming from we also have livestock, right?
Oh, yeah.
So no matter how cold and muddy, because you get into mud season, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I want it to be cold enough to freeze the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want the ground to be frozen because when it unthaws,
you want
there is no bottom.
Frozen.
Yeah.
There's no bottom. Just right through the center of the earth.
Yes, you just keep sinking. You're like, I could just keep sinking. So, and then you lose your boots sometimes in the mud. So,
yep,
yeah,
you do.
Yeah. It happens. It happens. We have talked about all the plants, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface on these winter interest plants. But
quite a few we've left off.
There is. I mean, we did not. To our credit, we did not once mention, I don't think, ornamental cabbage.
It's because we all know the stank that comes with that when it freezes.
The crucifers once they start to go down.
In a vegetable garden or in a garden or an agricultural operation, whatever, garlic is, it's not winter interest per se, but it's something
winter presence.
Green.
It is winter green.
It's like it's like kind of this magical thing rising out of the ground. And cover crop fields in the winter can be really, really beautiful.
They are really, really pretty.
Like if you have like a stand of like, say, wheat or rye or something like that green. With maybe some vetch that's grown up on it. It's just a really cool, it's a much more attractive aesthetic than like just completely bare ground that has like henbit and like stuff that's just sort of growing up. And I don't know. So that to me is like another example of just trying to find the beauty in that winter side of the seasonal coin.
Mm-hmm. So if you're a winter hater, maybe grab some of these plants we've talked about, or something else that strikes your fancy, and throw that in the landscape, and you'll get to appreciate it in the winter time, and maybe that'll get you through, and you'll be less of a winter hater.
I think you'll be less of a winter hater. I mean, it's like the devil's in the details for winter plantings, because you have to look for like specific cultivars that have been developed or bred with winter in mind. Like a mirror choke cherry and a plant like that you're like, choke cherry. But then you have these ones with this beautiful bark. But it seems like you have to dig one level deeper. Yeah. There's so many good examples where you're like, viburnum, but you start to dig down there and you're like, weather rod. It's amazing. And I mean, you just have to dig a little bit deeper and do a little bit more research for these plants that have winter interest. To me, that just takes a little bit more research, but that's part of the fun in it.
Well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's so many great colors. out there to explore. Not only that, but the structure and the shape. And I think about plants like sycamore that I completely just ignore all year long. But in the wintertime, they are so beautiful.
Well, just
And
some
I
of
always
those
notice
trees,
them.
like retaining leaves, like
Oh yeah,
other plants
true.
like that.
Yeah.
I've told you guys this before, but like one more time, a beech tree in the middle of winter in the like growing in the woods here is the coolest thing because they retain their leaves so long and their leaves turn this like yellow gold color, and then so it's like the dead of winter, no leaves anywhere, and you look through and there's just these little beech trees, and they're usually kind of small, and at least in our types of woods that have been logged and stuff, so they're kind of small, and they look like little ghosts to me. They're like spooky but in like a really fun way.
They've got a kind of a white bark, and they're really striking with
they're not like
colors.
a sycamore, but they're definitely, they pop.
Lighter,
and so
lighter.
Yeah, you'll just be like looking, you're driving down the road, everything's gray and boring, and you're on the highway and you look over and there's just like these little ghosts just out in the woods, and I'm like, oh, look at them.
You can pick them out
trees.
in the wintertime.
Hard to beach.
Hard to beach, man. Hard to beach. Cool. Well, any more last scene for people who might want to incorporate some winter interests? Any last scene kind of thoughts for that? No? Seeing none, we will move on. No. We hope you guys...
I think for me, there are the things that are... Yes, you plant them specifically for the winter interest. But the thing that I've just been hearing coming out over and over again is being a little more present. A lot of times people who are plant people are so keyed up for spring, summer, fall, and like fall color and all those cool things that are great. But there's so much happening. It's not like winter is this static, dead thing that we're told that it is. There's actually a lot of stuff happening. And so part of it is as much appreciating the beauty of winter and winter interest as it is, planning for it. But
I read a really good article on that, Brett. It's perfect. That's a perfect comment. And I just read it today as I was looking over the topic. And the article was like I don't know if it was a letter to the editor or it was in a trade magazine. I forget. But it was, I reject winter interest in plants and landscapes. And I was like, what? And got to reading that. It's exactly what you said. And it talked about why should we pick out winter specifically as needing to have interest, because it's a beautiful time also. But it's exactly what you just said, Brett. That's perfect. Yeah.
Appreciating the beauty. Look at us. Just really throwing some philosophy in. It is Hort Culture after all. So the best of plants and all the feelings they give us. So I felt like a little bit of like a nighttime radio DJ at that time. Right then I was like really quiet and talking about it. And anyway,
the best laid plants do grow well. I
don't know. There's something there. Let's workshop that a little bit more. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for joining us today. Leave us a review. Tell us what plant you liked, or what is your favorite winter plant. We'd love to know more about that, and you can share with us what maybe some of your favorites are, or if you are like, I'm driving and I couldn't write down any of these cultivars you all have been talking about, feel free to shoot us a message on Instagram at Hort Culture Podcast. You can also shoot us an email that is in the show notes, and we will get back to you with some of that info. I was gonna say, Jessica and I probably both have PowerPoints we can send you as a PDF, and so you can go through the whole thing if you want to and see all that kinds of stuff. So you can have a little bit of winter interest, some winter fun, or just appreciate. Maybe you'll notice some of the things in your landscape that are already there, and kind of be present in that moment, like Brett said. So I think that's a great idea. But we hope that as we grow this podcast, you will continue to grow with us, and that you'll join us next time. Have a great one.